At 4:54 p.m. on a quiet January afternoon in Los Angeles, a teenage girl dialed 911, her voice shaking as she begged for help. She had just walked into her backyard and found her father bleeding on the stone patio, stabbed so brutally that blood had pooled beneath him. By the time first responders arrived, it was already too late. What no one knew at that moment was that the man dying beside the pool had not been targeted by strangers, nor caught in a random act of violence. His death had been planned carefully, rehearsed quietly, and financed by betrayal. And the person at the center of it all was the woman he trusted most. This is the story of Fabio Se. He was the embodiment of the American dream. Born in Italy, he came to the United States carrying ambition, discipline, and a natural instinct for creativity that would eventually set him apart. Through years of persistence and talent, he built a reputation in the beauty industry that few could rival, earning respect not through shortcuts, but through consistency and vision. By 2017, Fabio had risen to the role of senior executive at a global hair care company, a position that placed him at the center of an elite professional world. He worked alongside industry leaders, collaborated with innovators, and mentored younger stylists who saw him as both a guide and an inspiration. Yet despite the prestige and access his career provided, Fabio's true sense of pride remained rooted at home. He shared a spacious residence in Woodland Hills, California, with his wife, Monica, and their teenage daughters, a home that reflected success, but also routine and structure. Friends described Fabio as deeply committed to his family. He was also present in his daughters' lives, and unwavering in his belief that loyalty was the foundation of any lasting relationship. From the outside, his life appeared balanced, secure, and even carefully built. What Fabio could not see was that the stability he trusted had already begun to erode from within. While his wife, Monica Se, had spent more than 20 years inside that same life, and while it offered comfort and status, it no longer fulfilled her in the way it once had. To outsiders, she appeared polished and composed, a woman who had achieved everything society told her to want. She lived well, raised her children in comfort, and moved easily through social spaces shaped by her husband's success. But privately, Monica felt confined by predictability. The structure that grounded Fabio felt suffocating to her, and the rhythms of marriage and family life began to feel more like limitations than achievements. She craved intensity and validation, something that made her feel seen in a way routine no longer did. That longing created a vulnerability she did not fully recognize, one that would soon be exploited by someone who sensed her dissatisfaction long before she admitted it herself. However, Robert Baker entered her life in an unremarkable setting, a gym she visited regularly, but his presence was anything but ordinary. He was charismatic and self-assured, projecting confidence that felt intoxicating to someone searching for disruption. To casual acquaintances, Baker appeared disciplined and respectable, someone who blended easily into everyday life without drawing scrutiny. What remained hidden was his past. Years earlier, Baker had been convicted of a serious sexual offense involving a minor, a fact carefully buried beneath years of reinvention. The version of himself he presented was intentional, polished, and designed to disarm. When he noticed Monica, he did not see a woman protected by marriage or family ties. He saw proximity to wealth, access to comfort, and a door into a life he believed he deserved. Their connection intensified quickly, moving beyond casual interaction into secrecy. Baker encouraged Monica to separate this relationship from the rest of her life, urging her to communicate through encrypted applications and burner phones. What began as discretion soon became isolation, with Baker positioning himself as her primary emotional anchor. Over time, Monica's attention shifted almost entirely toward him, leaving her marriage emotionally hollow, even while it remained intact on the surface. Investigators would later uncover just how deeply Baker had embedded himself into Monica's daily existence. Her communication with him eclipsed nearly every other relationship in her life, including those with her husband and daughters. By the time anyone around her could sense what was wrong, the bond had already transformed into obsession, setting the stage for choices that would permanently destroy everything Fabio had spent his life building. As Monica's involvement with Robert Baker deepened, her marriage to Fabio slowly shifted from something she lived into something she managed. Her home became a place she navigated rather than inhabited, and intimacy was replaced by routine. It got to a point her friends began to sense the distance, even if they could not yet name it. As Monica spent more time away from the house, invented reasons to leave early or return late, and seemed constantly glued to her phone, guarding it with an urgency that felt new, Fabio noticed the change, but never suspected its meaning. After more than 20 years of marriage, betrayal was not a possibility he seriously entertained. He believed in the life he had built and trusted, the woman beside him, assuming that whatever distance existed was temporary or rooted in stress. That trust left him exposed to what was happening beyond his sight. Behind closed doors, Baker's fixation intensified. What began as desire evolved into possession, and soon, Monica was no longer just someone he wanted, but someone he believed belonged to him. He spoke about their future as though it were inevitable, framing her marriage as an obstacle rather than a commitment. That obstacle had a name, and it was Fabio. As their conversations grew darker, the affair transformed into something far more dangerous. Baker talked openly about escape, about starting over, about a life stripped of responsibility and consequence. Those conversations took a decisive turn when the subject of money entered the picture. Fabio carried a life insurance policy worth more than $1 million, a detail that shifted fantasy into possibility. To Baker, the policy represented a solution, a clean and permanent answer to the problem standing between him and the life he wanted. To Monica, it became a temptation she did not immediately reject. Divorce would mean scrutiny, financial division, the unraveling of the image she had maintained for decades. What they began to consider instead offered silence, finality, and control. The idea did not arrive in a moment of passion. It emerged slowly, deliberately, and with frightening clarity. Baker understood that carrying out such a plan requires help. He contacted Christopher Austin, a longtime acquaintance who trusted him and had no idea how far this request would go. Austin believed he was traveling to California for a casual visit, unaware that he was being drawn into a carefully crafted narrative of desperation and urgency. Baker portrayed Monica as a woman trapped in an abusive marriage, and someone who needed intervention rather than escape, which turned out to be a lie, but it served its purpose. Monica herself reinforced it, participating in conversations and presenting herself as vulnerable and afraid. She welcomed both men into her home under the appearance of hospitality, guiding them through the property as if offering nothing more than courtesy. In reality, she was showing them entry points, sightlines, and habits. Every detail shared was a piece of reconnaissance disguised as normalcy. Control became the foundation of the plan. Baker installed GPS tracking devices on Fabio's vehicles, allowing them to monitor his movements with precision. Monica upgraded the home's security system, giving herself remote access so she could see when Fabio was alone and when the house was clear. The plan relied on timing, isolation, and the appearance of chance. Nothing was left to impulse, and by January 2017, every element had been positioned. On January 23rd, Monica left the house in the afternoon, telling Fabio she had errands to run. Surveillance footage would later confirm her movements. Placing her miles away at the exact moment distance was needed most. While she shopped and established her alibi, Baker and Austin moved toward the house. They approached calmly, dressed like men out for a jog, blending into the quiet neighborhood without drawing attention. The front door was unlocked, exactly as planned. Fabio was outside near the pool, sitting in a familiar space where he often relaxed after work. He had no warning and no opportunity to defend himself. Baker attacked with a knife, striking repeatedly in a burst of violence that left no room for escape. The assault was swift and overwhelming, ending Fabio's life in the place he felt safest. Minutes later, the illusion of normalcy shattered completely. Fabio's teenage daughter arrived home and found her father lying motionless. She was the one who called 911. She was the one who screamed into the phone, begging for help, begging for him to breathe, begging for time to rewind. Her voice echoed through the neighborhood, carrying a grief that could not be undone. But by the time first responders arrived, there was nothing left to save. Fabio Se was gone, and the life he had built had been erased, not by strangers alone, but by a betrayal that began inside his own home. Monica returned home to flashing lights, police tape, and a crowd of officers filling the quiet street. Her reaction appeared exactly as expected. She collapsed into tears, repeated the same phrases again and again, and clung to those around her as if overwhelmed by shock. To anyone watching from a distance, she looked like a woman whose world had just been destroyed. But as the hours passed, investigators began to notice subtle inconsistencies, and behind closed doors, her focus shifted quickly from grief to logistics. She asked questions that felt premature, particularly about Fabio's life insurance policy. She wanted to know how it worked, who handled it, and when it would be paid. The timing of those questions stood out, and detectives took note. The physical evidence at the scene raised even more doubts. The house showed no signs of a struggle consistent with a burglary, as expensive belongings were left untouched, and there was no forced entry anywhere on the property. Security footage told a clearer story. The cameras captured two men approaching the home, and later fleeing the area in Fabio's car, which was abandoned a short distance away. Inside the vehicle, detectives found blood, a trail that led them directly to Robert Baker. When investigators questioned Monica about Baker, she downplayed their relationship, insisting he was little more than an acquaintance from the gym. The claim unraveled almost immediately. Phone records revealed constant communication, and encrypted messages showed emotional intimacy that contradicted everything she had said. The image of a grieving widow began to fracture. Police placed Monica and Baker under surveillance, expecting distance or panic after the murder. Instead, they observed something far more damaging. The relationship continued. They traveled together, spoke freely, and made plans that assumed law enforcement would never close in. Their confidence revealed how deeply they believed the crime had been executed without flaw. In June 2017, detectives set a trap. They staged a traffic stop that placed Monica and Baker together inside a police vehicle equipped with recording devices. Believing they were alone, the two spoke candidly. Their conversation exposed awareness and a shared understanding of what had happened. That recording would later become one of the most critical pieces of evidence in the case. They were both arrested soon after, and by the time the case reached trial, the narrative prosecutors presented was not one of chaos or coincidence, but of planning and intent. Jurors were shown communication records, GPS tracking data, surveillance footage, and the step-by-step breakdown of how the murder had been orchestrated. Christopher Austin took the stand and described his role, the lies he had been told, and the ways Monica actively participated in planning Fabio's death. In a dramatic moment, Robert Baker attempted to shield Monica by claiming full responsibility, insisting he acted alone out of obsession, but the jury was not persuaded. The evidence painted a different picture, one of collaboration rather than compulsion, and of a plot that required Monica's access, timing, and consent. After careful deliberation, the jury found Monica Se guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Baker received the same sentence, while Austin was given a reduced term in exchange for his cooperation and testimony. Fabio Se's life ended in violence, but the values he lived by did not disappear with him. In the years since his death, scholarships and educational initiatives have been created in his name, honoring the mentorship, creativity, and generosity that defined his career. His daughters were left to rebuild their lives, carrying both loss and truth, forced to reconcile the father they loved with the betrayal that took him away. This was never a story about robbery or chance. It was a story about desire, greed, and a deliberate choice to destroy rather than walk away. It is a reminder that the most dangerous betrayals rarely come from strangers or shadows. They come from the person who knows your routines, shares your home, and stands closest when your guard is down. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more true crime stories like this. Your support helps keep these stories told.